Good morning and welcome back to Mobility Matters. I'm your host, Javier Betancourt, Executive Director of the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust, or CITT. We're the quasi-independent agency of Miami-Dade County charged with overseeing your half-penny sales tax for transportation. So as you know from watching this program in the past, 20% of all the funds that we receive are distributed to each of our 34 municipalities on a pro rata basis. So larger cities get more money, smaller cities get a little less. And those cities have to use their funds for transportation projects and services as well, with a minimum of 20% of what they get going to transit. So today I'm honored to have a representative from one of our municipalities here. We have Councilman Ariel Meyer with the Village of Pinecrest. Councilman, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Javier.
And so Pinecrest is one of our newer cities here in Miami-Dade County, although I think I saw somewhere that you're about to celebrate. Is it your 30th?
30th.
Year? Wow, so time flies.
Yeah, time flies.
It seems like it was incorporated only yesterday. And so but here we are, 3 decades. Excellent. So you are presumably a resident of Pinecrest.
I am.
But I don't know that you were born and raised. And so tell us a little bit about your history, where you're from, maybe some of your past employment, and how you ended up becoming councilman in Pinecrest.
Okay. So I've been a Pinecrest resident for about 10 years. In Miami, in the greater Miami area, I've been a resident for about 20 years. Also lived 10 years in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm originally from Argentina, born and raised in Argentina. Moved to the U.S. when I was 24, so you can run your numbers.
So Lionel Messi fan.
How old I am already. Certainly a fan, yes, absolutely. I think it's been a good influence. It's been a positive influence both within the pitch as well as outside of the field.
Excellent.
Yeah, very much so. So, yeah, as I said, born and raised in Argentina, moved with my then girlfriend to the U.S. We had an opportunity for work in the Bay Area, specifically for a wine group based out of Napa.
Oh, nice. That's my dream
So
job.
we didn't hesitate when the offer came in. And what was intended to be a one-year project became 2 or 3, and then we had our first daughter as we lived in the Bay Area. And then it became 9 years, and then we eventually decided to move to Miami. We wanted to be closer to family, closer to our culture. You get a lot more visitors from where we're from Argentina, when you live in Miami versus when when we were in the Bay Area.
Yeah, you can only drink so much wine.
Exactly. Yeah, at some point that became a given, the new baseline. And then we expanded our family. We had 3 more kids after moving to Miami, and so we're obviously since then married and have had 4 kids. 3 of them daughters, and the youngest one is a boy.
Excellent. So you've been in Pinecrest for a few years, as you said, and what made you run for office?
Well, it's a combination of things. Early on, as we were originally living in Coral Gables before moving to Pinecrest, and I've always been a fan of giving our children as much independence as possible. One of those things involved training them to ride bikes from an early age. And specifically with our first daughter, it meant riding with her our bikes from Coral Gables all the way to her school, which was at that time the Gulliver schools. And that was about a 3-mile ride that we did together for a few years. And then, since then, as we started raising a larger family, all of our other kids starting riding bikes to school, we've encouraged them to do that by themselves, or at times we would ride with them. And there was one aha moment along the way of sort of like that journey that we had as a family, and it was when trying to advocate for building a crosswalk that would connect the old Cutler Road path, or the path that runs alongside Red Road that then becomes Old Cutler Road, into the Gulliver campus, the one that's based in Coral Gables, South Gables. And that became a little bit of a project that lasted about 10 years until finally the school agreed and supported the project, and a crosswalk was built. And we went from seeing maybe 2 or 3 families riding bikes to Gulliver at that time to now I think there's probably north of 50 kids that are riding their bikes to the Gulliver campus in South Gables. And it was an aha moment to me, because it meant, okay, if you build the right infrastructure, you provide kids or families with the right elements of safety, then parents will be more comfortable letting their kids ride.
Yeah.
And as the number of kids grow that are riding bikes, that also generates a little bit of a ripple effect. Other families become more comfortable with the idea. And that's why we're seeing such larger numbers of kids now riding. And I've decided to make that the work that I did together with other parents in advocating for that crosswalk something bigger. I think running for council, becoming a council member at Pinecrest was potentially the vehicle, amongst other reasons why we want to do that, including giving back to the community that has welcomed us and made us feel at home, Pinecrest for us specifically. This idea that with greater infrastructure in support of biking and walking, we should see over time more people doing that. And the impact would be much greater than just a simple crosswalk from Old Cutler Road into the Gulliver campus.
That's great. And you said it took 10 years to get that crosswalk. And you would think it's such a simple thing, it's such an obvious thing to have a crosswalk so that children can cross the street safely to get to school. And yet
these things
you must
are not
have encountered a lot of obstacles. Like, what were some of the issues you had to overcome?
You know, if I had to summarize it, it really comes down to one thing, and I think it applies to local government or greater governments in general, and it's political will. It doesn't really take much convincing for anyone to realize, certainly if you had a crosswalk, people would feel safer to utilize it, and and that over time maybe walk or bike more to campus. That's almost like a no-brainer. But you're afraid you might upset some people if you're going to have that crosswalk in place, or you may interfere with the flow of traffic if there's a crosswalk, etc. And since we are such a car-heavy culture, anything that has to do with potentially interfering with the free flow of vehicles, I think can be a touchy political topic.
Yeah.
And so it takes political will more than anything else. And that's really what happened with Gulliver. And I'm extremely grateful to their administration. Simon Hess is their CEO, their president. Simon came on board, it must be closer to 2 years now. He came from running public schools in the Boston area. And when I first met with him and I advocated, the buildup of the crosswalk together with a few other parents, he looked at us and he goes like, that's a no-brainer. We should have a crosswalk here. I would want to see more kids riding bikes to the Gulliver campus. And that's how it really happened. Besides the advocacy work, it was having the leadership in place that was comfortable with making that move.
Yeah, you kind of need both sides of the spectrum. You need that grassroots activism, but then you need a champion, on the top
absolutely.
who gets it and makes it happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you for sticking with it and getting that crosswalk built. And it sounds like that maybe kind of interested you in public service and the possibilities of doing more. So tell us about what you're doing now as councilman in Pinecrest in this area.
Well, first and foremost, listen to our residents, serve our residents, and as a council member, our role can be fairly wide in terms of what we get to cover. But it's mostly policy, setting policy, passing ordinances or resolutions, recognizing residents that have contributed to our community in ways that we would want to highlight. And at times, yes, it's getting into deeper elements that could be more controversial. But it's about giving back. All of us are residents of Pinecrest. We want, and we enjoy Pinecrest as it is. We want to protect our quality of life and that of our residents, and if not, also not just protect, but also enhance it further. And all of these things, as people enjoy their lives more, and Pinecrest helps attract more families to Pinecrest. And yes, it has an economic value over time, which is reflected in property appreciation, which to some, that's also an important factor. So it's about giving back to our community, and certainly, as giving back also means providing guidance, setting vision for our village together with my colleagues and our mayor, and setting strategy. In other words, what are the things that we will not do? What are the things that we should do? And in what sequence, in what order?
Right.
And then as we perform that role, which is more of an honorary role, none of us get paid to do this. We are supported by an incredible staff of about 150 people now, police, office, planning, etc., public works, who are incredibly professional and whose work is a full-time work to build and contribute to our community as employees of the village.
And I have to underscore that because we work with, staff and officials at every city. as I said, we give each city, funds to put towards transportation projects. And Pinecrest has a very professional, forward-thinking staff and officials. So we've had Mayor Corradino here before,
Yeah.
known him for years. So the village really is very capable and really trying to move the needle. I mean, it's already great, and you could kind of sit on your laurels and just kind of, enjoy what you already have, and yet everyone is committed to make it even better.
Yeah, which I think takes us to a topic that we may want to spend a little bit of time on. And protecting our quality of life, one could argue, well, but what's really threatening your quality of life? When you use the word protecting, it means that there's something that's possibly attacking the quality of life or putting it at odds. And I'm convinced that the greatest threat to the quality of life of residents of Pinecrest, and it's not unique to Pinecrest, I'm sure it's a much greater issue in the broader Miami-Dade area, is traffic.
Right.
The growing number of vehicles that are faster, heavier, a lot of the distractions that involve driving, or affect driving or focus on driving, all of these things are having an impact on our residents' freedom to move within our village in ways that are different than riding a car. Mm-hmm. So if you wanted to walk or you wanted to ride your bike in Pinecrest, or join your kids on the ride to school, that's increasingly becoming more difficult with, again, more volume of vehicles driving at times faster and more recklessly, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And this is what really people worry about. It's what we hear is the number one complaint of our residents. Traffic.
Yeah, this thing is both a blessing and a curse, right? On the one hand, I could plug in my destination and figure out the quickest route to get there. On the other hand, you have a lot of people driving like this.
Yes.
And those people have almost hit me several times when I used to bike to work.
Yeah.
So it is a big problem.
And it's really something that's hard. There's a law in Florida basically makes it illegal to text while you're driving. Yeah. But not to hold the phone while you're driving. So if you're a police officer, it's really hard to enforce the rule of no texting, because someone could argue, well, I wasn't really texting, I was just with my phone. And so that leads to situations where about 90% of drivers, as I've seen recently in the research, are distracted drivers because of their phones or other things that may take their attention away from the road.
Yeah. And so because of that, a lot of people are scared to allow their children, for instance, or even themselves to ride a bike, to walk to school.
Yeah.
And yet, if we give in to that, right, where do we end up? And so what is it that we can do to make that journey safer so that parents can feel comfortable allowing their kids to ride a bike to school like you have?
Yeah.
And what is the village in particular doing in that area?
Before we get specifically into the what, because this is not really a formula that we need to reinvent. There are other cities that have gone through this transformation, you could argue, or this evolution, possibly, maybe a better word, or if anything, going back to where it used to be, 30, 40 years ago in a way. There's a playbook for this. But I think what's really important is to maybe stop and think about why would you want to do this first.
Right.
And, I'll start with, if you're driving a car and if you think that you will never use anything but the car to go around, as there are more cars on the road driving, the value of driving diminishes. Your experience as a driver becomes worse. We see these commercials for wonderful electric cars, but if you look at them closely, they're never taken on a highway, where a vehicle is stuck in the highway.
It's a beautiful, windy mountain road.
It's usually,
right?
Exactly. They're all by themselves having a wonderful time driving. The reality of driving is far from that.
Sure.
It's become much more of a stressful situation. It's getting people on edge. So as there are more car drivers, as there are bigger cars on the road that take up more space, and so on and so forth, the experience of driving is one that gets worse over time. So it's one of those things that the more cars there are, the lower the value of driving. So if you're a driver, it's in your best interest that if cities invest for other families that are, however, willing to consider using something different than the car, maybe for short trips within their community, and consequently there are fewer cars on the road, if you're a driver, you would want that. I've read recently that in the Netherlands, where obviously, we've all read about the Netherlands and their transformation over the last 50 years to become a bike-first nation. The happiest drivers in the world are the Dutch drivers. Surprisingly, even though, bicycling is probably the most important form of transportation in the Netherlands, bicycling and transit. But, so there you go. The fewer the drivers are out there, then the better experience you're going to have as a driver. So this is something that you would want. You would want to see other people riding bikes or walking if you insist that you want to be a driver. Your experience is going to improve as there are fewer cars on the road. Then there's the aspect of environment. For some, not saying for everyone, but for some people, what is in their interest for promoting biking and walking is that there will be less pollution. Biking and walking obviously has a much lower carbon footprint than driving a car. And even riding an e-bike has about 1/6 of the carbon footprint per person per mile compared to an electric car. So if environment is what you really care about, you would want to see more people walking and biking versus using their cars to go everywhere, even for short half-mile trips or 1-mile trips. If you're a caregiver, you're a mom who gets to drive their kids to school and pick them up from school every day. And I'm saying mom because most of the caregivers, free caregivers, are mothers, not dads. That's just a fact. If all of a sudden your kids are able to bike to school again, as they did 30 or 40 years ago, you would get back about an hour to an hour and a half of your day that you could spend in whichever way you want, but certainly not being stuck in traffic, doing other things that are meaningful to you. So you can get some time back if you're a caregiver, the more people bike. If you're concerned about older residents being increasingly more lonely, as is really the case across America, older adults are increasingly more lonely. Right. And this has become a problem of pandemic proportions and leads to health problems for our elderly, etc., the more lonely they are. Biking, if you design a city for biking and walking, you bring community to the doorstep. Yeah. Our approach to building community traditionally has been we're building parks. We're opening up new parks so that people can hang out at the park. But that means you need to go to the park to experience community. What I'm advocating for, and I think what we're starting to realize more and more with fellow colleagues at the Pinecrest Village Council and others, is that our first step was to, in our strategic plan was to build these parks. Now that we have wonderful parks in Pinecrest, we want to make the entire village of Pinecrest a park. In other words, bring community to the doorstep. For someone that's older, that feels lonely, that hardly ever sees anyone out there, their kids come to visit maybe once a month, once every 2 months or so, to open the door one morning and see somebody walking by or riding their bike and saying goodbye to you means a lot. Yeah. Just a simple good morning or good afternoon or how are you, Mr. X or Mrs. Y, makes a huge difference for someone that's lonely. And if you care about the loneliness affecting older residents, you would want to see more people out there because it decreases that.
And I don't think it's unique to the elderly, by the way. I think increasingly we've become an isolated society at all age groups. We're isolated in our homes. We've isolated land uses. We're isolated on this.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a point that really kind of applies even more broadly.
What really touched me personally, amongst all these other things that I've talked to you about, which all of them resonate for me, but they may not resonate for everyone. Or some of them may, but not all of them, is the mental health crisis that affects our teenagers. Yeah. Especially because I'm a parent. I have four kids. Two of them are teenage daughters. One is already a little bit older. The 9-year-old boy will eventually become a teenager. And I'm worried about this. And, Pinecrest residents are not an exception to what's affecting our teenagers nationwide. And for girls, especially for girls, this is proven. Girls' mental health has declined considerably over the last 10, 15 years, teenage girls. And this has been driven by the use of smartphones and social media, leading to doubling the rates of eating disorders affecting teenage girls, and to the point where 1 out of 10, even maybe 2 out of 10, depending on the community, teenage girls have some sort of an eating disorder. They may not know it, others know it, but they do have it. And it used to be in the single digits 10, 15 years ago. For boys, The problem becomes online gambling, watching porn online, unfortunately, also playing social games online,
Typically
leading
violent,
to a lot of leading to a lot of isolation, being lonely in their bedroom, never coming out of their bedrooms, and a lot of it has led to suicide rates amongst teenage boys also growing considerably, accelerating at a tremendously concerning pace over the last 10 years. So for girls, it's social media. For boys, it's typically isolation that comes from online gaming, gambling, and watching porn. But this has a root cause that is common for both, and that is that our kids have lost their independence in the last 20 or 30 years compared to when you and I grew up.
Oh, yeah. Playing
My
ball out in
parents
the
were
street,
happy to
of
see
course.
us out there playing. The problem was to actually get us back into the house to eat dinner. Whereas now the parents, if any, are just pushing them out to play. Yeah. Versus, hey, come out of your room, stop
But
playing
in an
online.
organized play date fashion, right?
So,
we can't even let them play on their
I
own.
believe the greater the options in mobility, the more independence we give back to our children.
Yeah.
When you design a city for biking and walking, it's safer to be out there. You can trust that your children will be able to go to school by themselves or go to a friend's place that lives only 4 blocks away from your house without you needing to drive them. And that means they're more out there, they're less time lonely, isolated, doing these things.
Right.
And to me, it's a way of, fighting back to what the damage that social media, gaming, and other things have done to our teenagers. When you do these kinds of things, when you build safety for walking and biking in your community, you're fighting this. And this touches me personally because I care a lot about the mental health topic that affects our teenagers. I could go on forever. There's health benefits from riding a bike. Obviously, the healthiest nation in the world is the Netherlands because their population is the most active. They're all out there biking. And so they're staying away from going to the emergency room. They're living longer than we are living. Comes all of these benefits from active mobility that obviously don't need to be explained, and so on and so forth. And finally, I'll say, to some that argue that as you build more bike paths or you build more sidewalks, you're inviting people into your neighborhood that are unwelcome, I would say it's the opposite.
It's the opposite, absolutely.
When the more people are out there, which are mostly your neighbors, the people that you should know that you don't yet know, that live nearby, maybe the house next to yours. But the more they're out there and the more they know you, the safer the community becomes. Pinecrest has been running crime watch or neighborhood watch groups for years now. We have more than 30 neighborhood watch groups in Pinecrest that are active. And this is one of the key reasons why our village has now reached the lowest levels of crime that we've seen historically. Besides the great work that our police do, it's because our neighbors are out there and they're calling in every time they see something that's unusual.
Yeah.
This would happen more and more if more people are out there.
Eyes on the street.
So I could go on forever, but if you care about the environment, you would want more people biking versus driving a car. If you're a car driver, you want fewer people driving so you can have a better experience driving. If you're a caregiver, you can get an hour back in your day if your kids were to go to see their friends by themselves versus you needed to drive them everywhere. If you care about the older residents being lonely, give them a chance to say good morning to someone every day. If you care about mental health affecting your teenage kids or possibly affecting them at some point, you want this. You want to give them some independence back. Being in a healthier society, building more community, bringing more safety to your neighborhood. These are all the things that drive me every day to advocate for this transformation or this evolution in Pinecrest of getting people to bike and walk more.
And as you said, there are another 10 reasons, right? So I know it's good for economic development. It supports business. Oftentimes businesses that support, bike usage,
right.
absolutely. They see increases in sales. And so 1,000 reasons why we should do it. Let's turn the page a little bit and talk about transit. As I said, some of the funds that the city receives is meant to go towards transit. I know that the city runs a couple of transit services. Can you discuss those?
Yeah. So specifically, we run 2 transit services. We have the freebie service, and we also have something that we call the People Mover, which is basically a shuttle service, mostly used by kids going to our middle school or to our high school that live in Pinecrest that are not eligible for using public school transportation. To those families, we offer the People Mover as an alternative. And the intent is to obviously, help kids be more independent, but also take cars off the road when we offer those kinds of services. In the case of freebie, It is to provide connectivity to residents and people that work in our village to transit hubs, whether it's a bus station or whether it's also the Metro Rail stations in Dayland, for
Yeah, I
example.
think it connects to Dayland South or North, I forget.
Well, Freebie can connect you
Either
to,
one. Okay,
to
yeah.
either one.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. And we've seen from our heat map analysis of where the rides begin for Freebie or where they end, a lot of the rides begin or end at the transit stations.
Yeah. Are there any particular plans to either expand either of those services or even going back to the bike network? Like, what is the village currently working towards?
We're constantly evaluating options to provide more access to mobility that does not involve using a private vehicle with single occupancy ridership. Some of the things that we've discussed at the council level in past workshops have been related to expanding the people mover service, potentially connecting people mover to transit hubs so that they're also used for allowing residents to take shuttle service to and connect to the Metro Rail. I'm a big fan of these kinds of alternatives because, again, you have more people riding in one single vehicle, takes cars off the road, and that brings value to many others, as we've talked about.
Excellent. If people are interested in learning more about what the village is doing, where should they go?
Well, our website is constantly up to date with the different initiatives that we have running. There's also a long list of capital projects that we've highlighted. There's one specifically that I'd like to talk about, which is underway as we speak, and that is that we are building a new shared use path along Kendall Drive. The intent of that path is to connect people that were already riding their bicycles on Red Road and the path on Red Road, being able to extend their ride now on Kendall, and in the future even possibly connect all the way up to the underline.
Excellent. So I love that we're ending on connectivity because what you're doing in Pinecrest isn't isolated, right? So we need to connect to our adjacent municipalities and to the county. And it sounds like the village is definitely doing that. So.
Absolutely. And, we are keen on partnering with our neighboring municipalities. At the end of the day, when you're building a network for biking or walking, you need to provide connectivity. You need to allow people to go from A to B and along the way feel safe and comfortable during the entirety of that journey. And that we cannot do alone, especially if we'll want to connect to the backbone that Underline provides to the Miami-Dade residents for active transportation or to public transit or to neighboring municipalities.
That's fantastic. I'd love to hear that. And to all of your neighboring municipalities, I know they appreciate the village's efforts in this area. You really are a leader, and we certainly encourage you to keep that up.
Thank you.
Council member, that's all the time we have here, unfortunately. I do thank you for your service. Again, thank your staff and your officials for everything that you're doing to make not only the village, but Miami-Dade County a more mobile and connected place. So keep up the great work.
Thank you. And thanks to you for inviting me and for also giving me an opportunity to share what we're doing.
No, anytime. Appreciate it. You're a wealth of knowledge, and your passion is unrivaled.
Yeah.
So really appreciate that.
Thank you, Javier.
Folks, that's all the time we have here on Mobility Matters. I invite you to learn more about the CITT by visiting our website at miamidade.gov/CITT. If you're interested in potentially applying to be a board member, we do have several vacancies. And we're also recruiting CITT ambassadors. These are people who ride the transit system on a regular basis, provide feedback, and get rewarded for providing that feedback with mobility rewards, free Uber, free Lyft, discounted transit passes. So check out those opportunities and be a part of the solution. Until next time, keep moving, Miami.